Okay, everybody. Hi, it's me, Mohammed speaking, and this is my first time doing a podcast, so bear with me. But this podcast is going to be about America coexisting with nature. So it's gonna be quite a rushed sort of skim through of American history because it's very tough to go through thoroughly 400 years of American history with limited time. So without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so we're going to start back with the roots. The roots start with Jamestown, whereas when the first settlers came. Now, there were settlers before the people of Jamestown, but they failed miserably. So we're going to start with whatever we have thoroughly recorded and what usually American historians would like to start with as the beginning of American history, which is Jamestown. So when you look into Jamestown, you can see that it was very tough. They were in a very definite battle against nature. So if we're looking at the whole picture, one of the main battles was against the natives. When there are several accounts when ships were trying to land, that they'd have spears and sticks and rocks and arrows being flung at them. They have no clue what's going on. So they were at definitely a battle with the natives. So what the Jamestown people did is that they built their city in this location. This is a little map drawn by a Spanish ambassador when he went to visit the place, and I guess this is their main fort, but they built a sort of triangular wall around their defense where there was this one entrance. So it was really roughly to get put together with wood and everything. They had to quickly plant the trees and kind of harvest them early, but nonetheless it proved somewhat effective against defending themselves until the relations with the natives became some sort stable. One of the biggest issues when the people of Jamestown was that they were completely it was a completely different environment, and with a different environment came disease. So one of the major diseases that struck the people was smallpox, and this totally devastated not only them, but this devastated the natives. And it said that more than 70% of the natives of America were actually killed due to disease, and of that, the highest percentage is of smallpox. So not only that, there were many mosquitoes and stuff of that sort, which is all plays into the environment. Now, as you can see by the picture, this is Jamestown. If you can see, there's that little triangular fortress that they started off with. But as they built on, you see that there's a lot of waterways, and it was very marshy land. So it wasn't good for agriculture at all because it was too much water. But it also gave a lot of spots where there was still water. As you can see, there's puddles over here and here and here. And what that caused was the dramatic swarm of mosquitoes during the seasons. So mosquitoes carry diseases, and they're just a pain. So they were actually responsible for a lot of the headaches that the natives experienced. So not only was it really hot temperatures, really humid, they had to deal with mosquitoes, foreign kinds of bugs, not being able to properly grow food. So what they do find out though is that they can grow one thing, the stinky weed, also known as tobacco. So tobacco became their stable crop, and through this is basically what America grew through. So if you want to honestly look at the whole picture, America was built upon smoking because this was the only crop at the given time that was actually successful and actually in high demand across the world. Well, with today's research, we know that tobacco is responsible for cancers and all sorts of pulmonary diseases and cardiac issues, but back then they could care less. 2-year olds, 3-year olds would smoke tobacco like it was nothing, popping a Marlboro, no problem. So they made the marshy lands and everything proved very good for growing tobacco, the really humid temperatures. And through this, Jamestown was able to grow, expand, and the whole American picture as a whole began to settle in because now America's worth something. So we go a little into the future after the Jamestown mess, and we can see that there's more colonies now. So in the southern colonies, this including the Jamestown right here, you can see that tobacco was a stable crop in areas of Maryland, Virginia, around the rivers and moist areas. And livestock, it's necessary to have some meat. They were having naval stores and bits of rice down in Georgia near the south, near the Savannah area. So they were getting along. It was nothing very major during, like nothing they could produce in the sense of need a manufacturer. It was more or less raw material. If we go to middle colonies, up to about New York, starting from Pennsylvania, you can see that they were a lot more cattle based. Up in the north, it was a lot easier to grow cattle. There's more population and the such, but there's also the availability of the resources needed. And so it was also necessary because there were a lot of shipping and a lot of naval activities would take place in these regions. So therefore, they needed a good amount of food to keep up with the population. This is a broader picture at the whole uh, the whole colonial seaboard. Sorry, I lost the word there. So you can see that it's mainly tobacco in this region again. Over here you have the agricultural crops, you have livestock over here. You can see that there's shipbuilding and the whoop-de-doo, there's rum production areas. It's not quite a coincidence that's next to the shipping area. What's a sailor that's not drunk? Anyways, moving on. Okay, so now we're going to move up to the pre-Civil War period. Now, the pre-Civil War period is really when American production started kicking in. This is when America is trying to not exploit, more or less, but finally be able to understand and use the resources that they have. So they're starting to make stuff out of it. They're starting to find, after the War of Independence too, America needed to start having its own, sort of market and sense of stability in the world economic picture. So back then there weren't many railroads, so they worked on trails. So this is the first occurrence of Americans starting to finally work their way around the geography to find trails. There's the Rocky Mountains here, there's rivers. So they're finally starting to use nature to their benefit to be able to, carve a path through the whole nation in a literal sense, having to go through mountains and everything. Nowadays we have, tunnels through the Swiss Alps, but back then they had to actually, scout, have sent parties, and have exploration and stuff of that nature. Okay, so also this time, this is when the southern agriculture started picking up. Slavery was a big thing in the South at this time because they needed the raw labor. They had so much land where they could grow cotton and other agricultural products. They needed a lot of labor to take care of it. So this area became known as the Cotton Belt. This is where the darker regions show where the cotton was much more produced. Over here there's more tobacco and other stuff, so it's very light production here. But as you can, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, this area right here was where cotton production was very, very, very important. It was their most stable crop and most important crop. Okay, during this time the Industrial Revolution also began. What you see here is the cod engine made by Eli Whitney. So what this was able to do was separate the seeds from the fibers of cotton, and it literally increased the efficiency of cotton production by over 50-fold. So they could literally one person could process 50 times more cotton than the average man. So if you know the history, Eli Whitney didn't get his patent in time, and a lot of people it was a very easy invention, so they copied it, so he really did not make any money out of it. Whoop-de-doo. But overall, this was a really, really, really big enhancement to southern agriculture. Another very, very big creation during this time was the Erie Canal. This is a very, very important point in human history period, because this is now when you start seeing Americans and humans as a whole starting to completely change the geography of an area to suit their needs. Because before, traveling across from the Great Lakes finally over back to the Pacific was a horrid travel. But they finally were able to put an effort through to cut a canal through this area, which greatly increased the efficiency of travel and it just increased their markets so greatly. New York became a big hit. And this is also one of the reasons why New York was one of the first capitals of the United States of America. Now, one of the biggest, I can't stress biggest concepts that needs to be stressed during this period of time is the Columbian Exchange. This was basically, honestly speaking, to my AP World History teacher, this was the concept he strained so hard on us. This is actually the same exact picture he used when he was trying to describe it to us. The Columbian Exchange shows the massive sort of movement of materials and other products across in a global picture. So you see the giant move of you see livestock, grains, stuff that's foreign to North America being moved in, becoming a stable crop over here because they find out it grows much better in North America. And you see these other foreign things that people couldn't even dream of coming from the Americas to Europe and Asia and all over the Eurasian subcontinent, including Africa. So you can also see that there's so many diseases. And our history teacher also, he pointed out the fact that the only disease that came from North America to Europe was, the first STD, syphilis, that time at point of time. So overall, probably other than the big agriculture benefits of theirs, there was also it affected demographics very highly, because a lot of people died, and there was a total change in the picture of what the sort of color of a region looked like when it came into terms of race. So again, Columbian Exchange, very important. Okay, now we're gonna move on to railroad age. Okay, so whoop-de-doo, railroad age, you can have the train. The train allowed for very rapid transport of goods. So this allowed the market, especially for the Southerners, to open up to a wider field of people and get to them quicker. It reduced the price of products because it's easier to attain them. It allowed for raw materials from the South to reach the North for processing and manufacturing much quicker. It overall changed the picture of it. It overall changed the economy of America. America was built on railroads at this point in time. This also marks the beginning of pollution, because with the burning of coal, burning of wood, and all this kind of mass production, you have these factories. This is literally where you can see that during the time period of the world, pollution starts becoming an issue. You have literally houses covered with soot. So at the same time, you'll see a giant demographical change. So if you want to include demographics into environment, you can see that there's a massive increase of African population in America, because with all this demand, you're gonna need more labor, and then slavery, and America being how it was and didn't want to let go of slaves, even though most of the countries abandoned it before, that's a whole other issue on itself. Anyways, so after this period of time, you have the World War I, Great Depression, New Deal kind of era, which we're gonna move into. So 1914, one of the biggest accomplishments now. There's a lot of things that happened in 1914, but accomplishment wise was the creation of Panama Canal, which was a really interesting creation, because with the amount of technology they had back then, it was really amazing how they pulled it off. If y'all know, the canal is built on interlocking systems, as you see here, where ships will go in, the gate will close, this water level will raise, this one will open, it'll move to this one, the water level will lower, go to this one, it'll raise, and then go finally over there. It's really amazing how they did it, but overall it impacted American trade as a whole. As you see, before the creation of the canal, for go from San Francisco to New York City was 13,000 miles, but with the creation of the canal, it got shot down to 5,200 miles, which was a great cut down. It's almost a third. Anyways, so we move on to World War I, and this is when America really starts exploiting its resources. Before, we thought Civil War had a lot of manufacturing. Well, America really stepped up its games. Now it's also created a great increase in pollution, as you have all these metallurgy factories working, these steelworking factories, these woodworks, these everything. The amount of resources put together just to put one tank, you need about 5 different factories producing parts: rubber, metal, wood, plastic. And so it was really big impact on the whole environmental picture of America. Another big issue during this time, even though it was banned, was chemical warfare. It's really sad. Whenever you study World War I, you always hear about mustard gas and how horrid of a thing it was. So this is a soldier affected by mustard gas. You can see there's humongous lesions under his armpit, on his ears, full of blood and pus. It's it's a carcinogenic and a narcotic and all these sort of things. It sticks to the skin. It basically rots the person living alive. At first, when you get exposed to it, you don't feel it. So it's actually responsible for millions of deaths, including hundreds of thousands of non-combatant deaths, combatant deaths. So after World War I, we get hit by the Great Depression. As you see, these are Hoover wheels. So you can also see a great amount of pollution. So during this time, the American stock was a bust. So people were looking for cheap jobs, and the only cheap jobs there were the ones in factories. And there's so many factories, so there were actually really a lot of jobs, but the population was so high that not everybody could have a job. Unemployment was insane. It was also because factories were working so efficiently that they were overproducing, which dropped the prices of many things, dropped the stocks, and then over speculation. So that's a 30, 40, 50 minute podcast by its own. But anyways, this also contributes to a great amount of pollution because you have a humongous population of people living in a very confined area. So water quality diminishes, air quality diminishes, disease goes rampant. It's very, very, it's not a fun place to be. Another thing during the 1930s, right after the Great Depression, was the Dust Bowl. So back in history, when they had that thing of manifest destiny, Americans moved all the way to the plains thinking that plains were a great place. They had songs and music and poems saying, "Oh, the plains are a great place." Well, whoop-de-doo, they go there and everything's dead. So, very, very tough line in the plains, very tough life in the plains. So they get hit by the Dust Bowl. Now, the Dust Bowl was caused by many, many factors. One of them was lack of rain. Another was locust infestations, which totally dried the crops and everything, and we'll get rid of them. Only way to get rid of them was to burn the land, and that caused, all the grass and go away. So everything's prone to erosion at this point in time, and then you get hit by this humongous windstorm, which literally carries grass all the way from carries dirt and dust and other sorts of things all the way from, I don't know, all the way to Oklahoma, from Oklahoma all the way to California. Like, honestly speaking, it went thousands of miles. Stuff was carried, and so this caused a humongous, like, large numbers of pneumonic diseases, like pulmonary diseases such as dust pneumonia. It destroyed crops. Like, many millions of people had to leave. The number total is about 100 million acres affected by the Dust Bowl, and it was a really, really bad period of time. So after the Dust Bowl, and the Great Depression, FDR comes with this revolutionary plan called the New Deal. And the New Deal was a great step towards just improving America as a whole. Although the effects weren't seen immediately, it was the beginning of American greatness, in the sense America finally started doing something right. So after years of pollution and everything, FDR also looked at pollution as a very bad thing. He understood that global warming might happen in the future. He had a good vision of what the course America was taking, what it would lead to in the future. So he started many different, the alphabet agencies. One of them was Prairie State Forestry Project, which, in coalition with other New Deal programs, was able to actually make a wind shelter, I forgot what it's called. It's called it's a wind shelter kind of. It's basically they planted 18,000 miles of trees to protect areas from wind, which is it's a unprecedented national effort. So you have also the U.S. Forestry Service, which helps protect forests. You have the Works Progress Administration, which provides labor and jobs to the people, as well as it increases the efficiency of work. They help the Prairie Service do the work, do the planting. You also have the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, which help provide a massive amount of labor for producing not only products and everything, but anytime labor was needed for any government project, people were there. So now we move on to the World War II in modern America. Time's kind of running short, so I'm going to kind of fly through this. But we have World War II. World War II, very, very bad time. Worst war in the American world history. Greatly contributed to pollution, as well as just environment as a whole. One of the greatest things of it being the A-bomb. Now, this is basically the beginning of radiation in the sense of global history. There really never was a radiation issue in history other than UV radiation, which comes from sunburn, which you go to Saudi Arabia, everybody has that. But this is the beginning of, basically, we can say, cancer in the world. But actually speaking, there were not cases of cancer or anything until the atomic age began. So after the first bomb went off at Hiroshima, radiation was basically all over the world. They don't want to admit it, but the whole world is today seeing the effects of Hiroshima. If you hear a person gets cancer in Europe, back then and during that time, and even today, Hiroshima plays a role in it. People don't want to admit it, but it's true. So you can see that now humans as a whole now have the ability to destroy thousands and thousands and thousands of square miles worth of land in a blink of an eye. Now they also have the ability to change the face of the earth as a whole, change the environment, change the livability of an area. This is when humans relationship with nature. Humans are now the enemy of nature. So of themselves too, not to mention that. And you also have the bombing of Nagasaki. This begins the nuclear age. So nuclear age, including the Cold War and Cuban Missile Crisis and all that kind of stuff. I'm not gonna go into deeply into that. Time's really long. I've stretched it pretty far, but this is the beginning where there's a humongous military effort by almost every country in the world, mainly U.S. and every powerful country in the world, mainly U.S. and Soviet Union, to start producing nukes and military effort to increase the armed forces. Around 1960, you have the OPEC. At this point in time, the whole world relies on one thing: oil, also known as black gold. And it literally is black gold. So OPEC was created by the Middle Eastern nations to control the oil flow, and they literally control our lives to this day. Whatever OPEC does affects every single human life, every single, I would say, at least American life, or any person who relies on Middle Eastern fuel. So because of the global reliance on OPEC, we can see today in Dubai, you need a police force with a Ferrari and a Aventador, to keep up with the really, really rich people that are making money off this massive American, not just American, but global reliance on this black gold. It's amazing how much you're surprised how much money those guys back there make in the Middle East. Anyways, so in 1970 we have Richard Nixon coming out with the EPA. So they start finally realizing that things are messing up, pollution's a big issue. So Nixon does something right, many things he did wrong, and creates this agency. Now, going to modern times, we have global warming. Now, ever since we were kids, we heard about it. I always looked at it as a bluff, and I honestly still look at it as a bluff, because they predicted by 2008 we should all be dead. And as far as I can see it, recent studies show that the ozone layer hole has diminished greatly. It's actually a lot smaller than it was before. So I honestly think it's kind of a hoax in the sense, but it's still a issue in the sense that America and the world needs to lower its dependence on fossil fuels. And so when I think of global warming, I don't think of the world ending due to, the Day After Tomorrow movie. Good movie, but I don't picture anything like that, but I picture a world that doesn't rely on oil. And so this is a picture of China and its, infamous haze of pollution that flows on top of it. This is a picture of probably the cleanest water on earth. But this is ice melting in other areas. This is probably Antarctica, the northern Arctic Circle. And so in the light of all this, America and other countries have been putting a big effort on alternative power. So this is a nuclear facility, finally using nuclear power for a good cause. One issue is disposing of the radioactive waste that comes from these nuclear reactions, but I think they built like cement lead bunkers like miles underneath the ground or something to take care of that. Anyways, but it's a good step. It's almost 100% clean, other than that waste that they handle. And it's really important that we should stop trying to think about blowing up each other. As one nuclear America, it's a cool fact. One American nuclear submarine has the ability to wipe all the life on the face of the Earth 7 times over. Just one. And I think we have 136 in commission. So I think it's a really good that instead of thinking about blowing each other up 1,000 times over, we're thinking about, ditching petroleum and stuff like that. We have windmills in the ocean, really pretty things, but they serve a purpose. And you have companies coming out with their own efforts. You have car companies starting to come out with electric cars. This is a Fisker Karma. It's on the expensive side, but it's a good concept for people to feed off, because not only is it battery powered, it has solar panels on the roof. So let's say you just leave it out in your parking lot, it could charge up a bit. So it's a good start. It's expensive and only rich people can afford it at this time, which is kind of ironic, because the people that can afford buying the gas for their car are the ones getting electric cars. So it's a step, though. Every journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. So it's starting, and America is also making an effort. You can see how it's helping marketing Toyota with the Prius, and it's helping. It's been providing. American government has also been giving loans and grants to Tesla for their battery and car research, and it's overall a good global effort. But we also need to realize that it's in our own hands and how we treat our resources. The world has been given to, at least if you believe in God, but the world is given to us as, in Arabic, what we use the word is amana, meaning a sort of responsibility, a kind of loan, and it's up to us to take care of it. And if we don't take care of it, that is our neglection towards the great mercy and blessing that it is to have all these resources. So it should be a global, not just American effort to keep the environments intact. Well, thank you for letting me take 25 minutes of your time. I know it's kind of stretched, but I hope you get the picture, and have a nice day.